Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Techno Peach Wash Process Ethiopia from Luna Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Luna based out of Langley, British Columbia. And before we start this review, just wanted to give a couple of quick shout outs. The first of which to Howard, who has been one of our longest subscribers. He is the one that alerted us to the release of this coffee, and that's a pretty big deal for us, so we wanted to give a shout out and thank you to Howard for that. We'll get into why that is a little bit later. And second, we wanted to give a shout out to Laura and Nate, the co-founders, co-owners of Luna Coffee. If you guys are watching this video as well, just wanted to say thank you for watching our last Luna review and keep up the good work. We've been a fan of your coffee since the first time we ever tried it, and that leads perfectly into the story of the first time we ever tried Luna's coffee, which was about 3 years ago now when we were in Vancouver. And it was at either the Revolver or the Nemesis. It was one of those two multi-roasters that they have up there where we saw this coffee. And we think the marketing and branding of this coffee is absolutely awesome, as the name Techno Peach is something that very much appeals to us. Love peach coffees. So when we saw it on the menu, it was a coffee we knew we had to try. Tried it for the first time on that day, and as a result, it's the first Luna coffee we've ever tried. And since then, we've been a fan of Luna's coffees and have tried them on and off as often as we could throughout the years. So yeah, it's a pretty important coffee to us for that reason, and this is kind of a great opportunity for us to discuss this coffee specifically. This right here is day 20 of this coffee. And Luna does have a recipe on their website. They like a 16:1 water to coffee ratio at 210 degrees Fahrenheit. We liked this coffee a little lower at 205 degrees, and we brewed it to the Chemex, of course. We've mentioned before that Luna is one of the lighter roasting Canadian coffee roasters, so we'll call them a light Canadian for the roast profile. And let's start discussing this coffee. Day 8, surprisingly, the most pronounced part of this cup of coffee was this really abundant honey to it. And it's not necessarily what we were expecting, but honey sweetness, as well as a pretty clear, distinct florality in the cup as well. And there was a slight bit of the stone fruit in the background. Of course, it's going to be that peachiness that's noted on here, but it was a tertiary characteristic in this cup of coffee, which was a little surprising to us, but we were expecting that this coffee might open up with a little bit more time. This was a pretty standard recipe, our 16.671, 204 degrees Fahrenheit, as we were just going to work with it from that point. Day 9 went back, and again, we were getting a little bit more of the florals in this cup, but again, it just remained kind of interesting as it felt a little muted. We couldn't shake the feeling that this coffee was at some point going to kind of explode. We were going to get a lot more from this cup of coffee, and that's why we continued to just kind of see what would happen with a little bit more rest. And then day 11, coffee was opening up a little bit, but the coffee wasn't opening up as much as we had expected it to open up. So we just continued to say we'll likely need still a little bit more time to settle. Pretty honey dominant with a slight peachiness to the cup of coffee. But again, the floralities were the secondary characteristic, and the florality was pretty nice in this cup of coffee. Day 12, we lowered the temperatures and we were seeing more improvement. Couldn't necessarily determine if that was from a lowered temperature or if it was from just slightly more rest. But the stone fruit remains the third most notable characteristic in this cup of coffee. Remarkably consistent cup of coffee, as no matter what sort of adjustments we made or what sort of rest we provided with this cup of coffee, it wasn't changing too much worth noting. Day 13, still continued to wait for the potential shift. Anything that we had made adjustments to didn't necessarily yield significant enough results for us to note. Coffee, still mostly honey and semi-sweet with, again, a continuous fair bit of florality. Those are the three characteristics. They were all very much there, and they were all very much in that order. Day 15, getting a slight bit more of some other flavors, including this vanilla cracker, and I believe they have listed on here peach cobbler is the way they describe this cup of coffee. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, like a kind of vanilla pastry to it. And that's what we mentioned as well, slightly sweet pastry component in addition to the rich honey. So we were getting a little bit more from this cup of coffee. But day 17, the final day, we took notes, and we were still noticing a subtle stone fruit in the background to the honey and florals, which throughout this cup of coffee, dominant, straightforward, pronounced, very noticeable and distinct, and a slight bit of citrus that was every bit as pronounced as the stone fruit. So those two fruit characteristics were just as similar in abundance as anything else we were experiencing, and we note, the final note, coffee was remarkably consistent. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting mill so you can see what we're getting. All right, and we have two things at level 4, the cleanliness and the florality. And of course, we say in other videos that sometimes we like to lump the caramel and the honey in together, but truth be told, there isn't too much caramel in this cup of coffee, so that's why we felt a little wrong if we had put the caramel any higher than 2. Yeah, there's definitely a pronounced honey, and if there was a way to chart the honey on this tasting wheel, then we'd probably put that at a level 4. perhaps even a level 5, as it's pretty pronounced and it's pretty clear in this cup of coffee. Let's see here, other things worth noting. Finish level 3. It surprisingly didn't have as lasting of a finish as we might have expected. Sweetness at a level 3, that feels about right. And we've mentioned before that Luna's coffees are on the lighter side of things, so the acidity at level 3, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That seems about perfect. And then the thing that's probably worth discussing the most is the stone fruit and the citrus fruit at level 3, as they were probably in just about equal abundance throughout drinking this cup of coffee. At no point would we ever say that the stone fruit reached a level 4. It was never an overly pronounced peachiness in this cup of coffee, no matter what we did. And it could be on us, but at the same time, no matter how much rest, no matter how much adjustments we made, as we made so many adjustments, we could never necessarily pull out a huge abundance of peachiness in this cup of coffee. And as a result, the citrus was every bit as pronounced as the stone fruit was for us. All right, our overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. So there's a reason we really like Luna's coffees, as they are very much our flavor profile, and this coffee right here, it did have a lot of the more soft and beautiful things that we really like, specifically the florality. We're big fans of florality in coffees. So this one right here had that in abundance, and it was quite nice. The honeyness was very nice, but would be lying if I said that I wasn't a little disappointed I couldn't get more peachiness from this cup of coffee, as it is labeled and marketed as a peach coffee, and it just was not the most peachy coffee I had. Well, it's just not the most peachy coffee I had experienced, and again, could be on me for not being able to pull that out. But I think if you're going into this coffee expecting a super peach cup of coffee, like a peach juice cup of coffee, you might be somewhat let down. But if you're looking at this coffee as something that's a little bit more on the lighter profiled cup of coffee with some really pretty florality and honey, then I think you'll be pleasantly happy and pleasantly surprised with how much you enjoy this coffee, as I did enjoy this coffee, but I will not hide the fact that I was hoping for some more peachiness from this cup of coffee. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to: obviously somebody that does like the lighter profiled coffees, somebody that doesn't mind just a slight bit of acidity, but most notably you have to be a huge fan of the florality and the honey, as if you're expecting those two things, this will come in abundance and it will create a very enjoyable and delicate, kind of just pretty cup of coffee. It's a pretty cup of coffee. But for the most part, I think I'm going to leave this review at that. If you have by chance had an opportunity to try the Techno Peach, would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well, as we've seen quite a few people commenting, reacting to this coffee, as I feel like it's a big selling point to a lot of people. This is such a well-marketed coffee that so many people want to try this coffee, and so many people have tried this coffee. So would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Techno Peach wash processed Ethiopia from Luna Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.